Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. That's sort of my go-to statement, but I am truly always excited to be on here and always excited to be talking with a creator, an artist, an author. And in this case, I have someone who is all three of those things: creator, artist, co-author, Aaron Boyd. Aaron, thank you for jumping on, and I'm tempted to like throw a dart over your shoulder right now, but I won't do that. Oh, and you have a Cookie Monster too. That's
Oh yeah.
amazing.
I what's behind me is a fraction. Um, I'm I'm a late first time father, and I will share my toys, but the really, really good toys, they're in hiding.
Oh yeah,
3-year-olds don't get. So yeah. What's behind me is what's safe for him to get near. So but thank
nice, nice. What is if you're a toy collector, this is not officially on the list, but I'm curious, what is the prized toy in your collection?
well, oh, that I still have. Okay. There's one that I did lose. The prize toy is actually something that was I'm looking over at it now. Um, my dad worked in a factory. He was a very creative person, though I don't think he understood he was a creative person.
Hmm.
And he would just build models all the time. And he built it's a German plane, it's an ME 109, and he just built it from scrap pieces of balsa wood that he had.
Wow.
And uh, before he passed away, I asked him about it. I was like, "Do you still have that plane?" He's like, "Oh, that crappy old thing." It's like, "Yeah, yeah. Do you have it?" And it's like, "You can have it if you." It was in a garage for 30 years, but it's like battle damage,
Yeah, yeah.
so I love it even more. So yeah, that's the one to grab if the house is on fire.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and with the family connection too.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, not
and
just
it
something you would get at Toys R Us. Yeah.
well, and it actually quasi makes appearance. It makes an appearance in one of my stories too that's coming up. So
Oh, nice, nice. I was gonna say, I was picturing doing like a small, like stop motion animated film with it, with your cell phone or something like that. But glad that it's making its way into the creative world too.
oh yeah, yeah. It's something I one of the things I always tell kids, well, and young artists. I don't, the older I get, the less I preach about the technical stuff, how to paint,
Yeah,
how you can pick that up.
yeah.
Have the experiences,
Hmm.
travel, make friends, try different dishes. All of that stuff enriches your creative form, whatever it is. So if you're a writer or a painter, even when you don't realize it, that room that you're painting is a room from some room you've been in before.
Hmm.
Um, I have a little toy bunny that makes it, which would be my second most prized toy. My stuffed bunny makes it into a lot of my books, like in the corner somewhere, and it
Love it,
makes
love
it
it.
more real for the viewer too. Even if they don't consciously pick up on it, it looks like it makes a space feel more lived in.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll mention a couple of titles, and then you can throw in any ones that you're particularly proud of. But there's Baba's Song, Alina's Jubilee, Calling the Water Drum, all of which are beautiful, beautiful books. Any that you want to add from the bibliography that you're like, this is the book?
Uh, the book that people most often want to talk about it, I did a pop-up book that you can't really find on shelves. It's
Ah,
the Smithsonian added it to it's the Cooper Hewitt. I forget the name of the museum. It's part of the Smithsonian. It's part of
hmm.
their rare books collection. But I think my most valuable book is one that I'm working on right now that I'm actually dropping with you because my agent told me not to put it on social media yet.
Oh,
Um,
oh, okay.
but
Well, I don't want to break any rules. I don't want to break any NDAs or
no,
anything like that.
no, yeah. I'm not going to get in trouble. It's it's all the paperwork's all done. I just haven't you know physically put it out there yet. But
Hmm.
it's a story that I wrote that actually is about the last night I spent with my father. Um, before the family had a breakup, and it was the last night I spent with him before that breakup.
Oh,
And it's a
wow.
beautiful, loving story. It's called Giving Good, and I'm that was one of the few projects, whether it's written or painted, where I finished it and I thought, I think that's good. Because usually
Nice.
I feel with a painting like that came out okay. That
Mhm.
means that's pretty good for me. It came out okay. And when I finished that story, I paused and I thought, uh-oh, I feel something different. I think I could admit this is pretty good. And
Nice,
I sent it
nice.
to my agent and she's like, yeah, this is pretty good. And when we put it out there, it was snapped up right away from a publisher. I won't share the
Awesome.
publisher yet, but so that I'm very excited about.
There is such an imposter syndrome that comes along with art and authoring and virtually anything that you do. As a doc student, I had it. As a teacher, I had it. And it's like you get to the end of something and you always see the flaws. So it's nice to, and even in the way that you say it, it's like, I feel like it's pretty good. You
Yeah.
know,
And you never get
it's good to
past it.
get that feeling. No, no.
The my late friend, one of my favorite contemporary illustrators is Jerry Pinkney. I don't know if you know him or his work.
I know his work. Yeah. Yeah.
He called me a couple months before he died, and we had a really good talk and just caught up with everything. And he was nearly, I think he was just about to turn 80. And his work is spectacular. He's won a Caldecott. And he's still like he's ashamed of various pieces that he keeps them, but he doesn't ever look at them. Yeah, I think there's a good balance of you want to have some of that so that you keep reaching.
Hmm.
And it's also good. I like to share that with young artists too, to know that, hey, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm almost always uncomfortable. And that's part of the game. That's part of it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the humanity that comes through in it too. And I was talking with Barry Kitson on an episode, and he's done comics for decades, and he said there's an issue of, I think it was Spider-Man, that he always, when people bring up the cover to sign, he finishes a little part that he never finished, which I think you're wearing a Spider-Man shirt, so that's kind of an
Yeah.
appropriate. Yep, there it is. Yeah. So there's like a little bit of webbing, and he always kind of adds that little bit in and then signs it.
But it's always the thing one of the things I always tell people too is that if it makes it to print, whatever it is, and you're like not satisfied with something, don't bring it up
Yeah.
because no one else has noticed it. The
Yep.
second you bring it up, that's all people are going to see.
Hmm.
So once something's behind glass or in print, and you see, you're like, oh, just don't say it. Just bite your tongue,
Yeah.
and because it's you know what, it's part of the human thing. I like the little imperfections anyway.
Absolutely. And they're there no matter what. So it's something to embrace. That being said, I've never caught an imperfection in your work. I'll say that. I don't have my list. So, nor am I that kind of reader. Like even with movies, uh, I'm just a lover of stories, and if there's a character that I love or a creator that I love, then I tend to focus on the positives. I don't know. That's
You and
me.
I both love something because I saw on one of your podcasts, Clash of the Titans, the original,
Yes.
and I know that it's claymation. I forget his name, Henry Hauser, or he's in one of the
Yeah.
famous.
Harryhausen. Hmm.
Yeah. And it's just good. And I always have believed that if something is good, it's good.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
don't have to apologize for it. Yeah, it's not CG. Yeah, you could tell that. But when you go to a movie or you get into a story, you allow yourself, you suspend, that system of belief so that you can get into the story. And I tested that movie. It's totally not age appropriate for a 3-year-old. I may have watched it too much with my 3-year-old. He loves Clash of the Titans.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. It is awesome.
Every time he sees a horse now, he says Pegasus.
Nice, nice. But at the same time, we don't have a real life example of Medusa or Pegasus. So who's to say that it wouldn't look claymation? Maybe it would move like that.
So I sat there with a 3-year-old and he was as blown away as I was when I was a little kid seeing it. So it's good.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. And if it's good, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with your work that's coming, you are both the author and illustrator. Are you doing all the things with that?
Yes. I'm doing all the things. I have 2 books that I'm working on right or that I signed the contracts on right before these hit. Um, they're both historical stories. I love history.
Hmm. Hmm.
I was shocked to find out that history is the least popular subject in American schools. Because
Interesting. Yeah.
I think it might be in high schools. I loved history always because it was like a movie. You
Yeah.
have romance, adventure, conquest. And so I jumped on this book. It's a his true story of a boy who donated his dog to the war effort in World War II
Wow. Yeah.
with the promise of getting the dog back. And they were happy with the way it was going. They asked me to do a second book, and I said, sure. And then the stories that I've been writing started getting out there, and then those got signed. So my 3-year-old will be starting kindergarten just in time.
Nice.
But
Nice. Nice.
the the second book that I wrote that um is an autobiographical title. Um I won't it's basically it's something that I think everyone can get behind
Hmm.
because regardless of one's gender or ethnicity or income bracket, we have all on some level been the other,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and it deals with embracing what your true self is. So,
Nice.
but that's all I'll say about that one because that's the last one on the list that I'll be doing. So I
And
have
that,
to have some secrets.
yeah, that is such a great theme. And I mean, talking again about Spider-Man as that's on your shirt.
Yes.
Um, like that feeling of being, am I the only one? Uh, am I the person that's alone in a room full of people? I feel like there's so many stories that capture that and speak to that and say, no, you're not alone. And I mean, through history, we can look at that with historical figures too and say, these are real people that have been through things.
And it's one of the main reasons I love going to high school reunions
Yeah.
because every decade more and more of it gets stripped away and you see that that kid who is maybe the beautiful one or the wealthier, they're like they had problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they may have acted cool and looked cool, but they're like, oh no, I was going through stuff.
Yeah.
And there's actually a line in my book that deals with that. That sometimes it doesn't matter what you do or don't do, life hits you,
Hmm. Hmm.
and kids experience that. And that was one of the big pushes that I had to start writing my own stories because I didn't want to pump the brake on what kids were feeling. I remember being in middle school and a little girl, I mean, because our age at the time, her father had died.
Hmm.
And teacher explained to us, so and so won't be here for a little while. Her father died, and she came back to school about a week later, and no one talked to her. Not to be mean, but I think there was just a collective fear.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't. What do you say?
Hmm. Hmm.
And therefore, nobody talked about it. And I remember just staring at her from slightly behind, and she had this blank stare ahead of her. And I want stories that reach those kids and say, "Hey, you're not alone.
Yeah.
We all have to figure it out." And even if you've been through it before, it still hurts the second time around. It hurts the
Hmm.
third time around. And it's if you persevere, you're better for it. You're better for it. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I feel bad when I can see something in a kid's eye and I know they're holding back. And it's like once you get them to talk about it, it's like, oh dude, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I've had so many friends that have like come out of the closet to me, and it's like, oh okay. In fact, one of my first girlfriends was Jewish, and I remember her like, I have to tell you something, and I was like, well, what? I'm Jewish, and I thought I was getting broken up with, and I was
Right.
like,
Right.
oh, do I need to do anything? She's like, well, no, I just thought you should know, and it's we all carry a certain amount of baggage, and
Hmm.
it's good to put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And good to be acknowledged in a way
Yeah,
that, and again, with art and with books, that's also a way of looking out at the world and saying, oh, there is somebody else that sees this part of experience or this part of the world. So you get to have that conversation even if you're not in front of the person.
Well, and comic books do that so well too, because well, every friend of mine that was into comic books, they were seeing themselves in that page, just plain and
Yeah,
simple.
yeah.
And comic books, which I'm really happy to see that they're finally getting the acceptance as literature.
Hmm.
As I said, good is good. If a story is good, it doesn't matter if it comes in a comic book form or, you know, a great Russian novel. If it moves you, if it moves people, it's compelling.
Yeah.
When the X-Men came out,
Hmm.
it was
Hmm.
really this creative way of talking about other stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, as a kid, I got that right away, and I thought that's genius. That's
Yeah.
so genius. Because if half the people that didn't like these knew what they were talking about, they would freak out. So no, it, it's it's a great medium to communicate, but also to express yourself in a safe way.
Hmm. Well, and you were talking about um otherness or the othering of people, and I thought about Spider-Man, but X-Men was one of those titles that came to mind immediately because I mean it's about those people that sort of find themselves on the fringe of society and
They may look like us, but they're not.
uh-huh. Hmm.
And yet at the same time, they realize that they have a special gift.
Yeah.
And that is something that I've always held firm to, is that I I don't even hide it. Sometimes for a laugh, I'll show my report card at book events.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's a little bit of a distraction because it's so horrible. It's horrible. It's so bad that I'm not embarrassed by it. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
something just crosses a line that could be embarrassing, but it's so bad that you're like, yep, that happened for many years. That happened.
Yeah.
But there was this spark that I had to create, and I
Hmm.
carried that. I knew at 5 what I was going to do. 5, oh, art, that's it. That's
Yeah.
what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is I had kind of this benign neglect from a lot of family members that, oh, he's the artist, and they let me be. I wasn't stopped. I wasn't terribly encouraged by it, but it didn't matter because I knew that it was something to me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it is true that if you have a passion for something, that's your best bet. That's your
Yeah.
best bet. Sometimes the most practical thing appears to be impractical.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you feel it and you love it, you're going to be one of the best at it. Do it.
Hmm.
I'm 52 now, and it's not uncommon for me to bump into people my age that I grew up with who look at what I do and they shake their heads like, I wanted to do that, or I've always loved that. And they may be making a lot of money and have a decent job, but they're like, it doesn't scratch that itch.
Yeah.
And so they wait for retirement to, it's like, no, no,
That's a
that's,
long wait.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that there was something else you said. Oh, the you're talking about the creative spark, and I was just wondering and thinking about the report card, where and how that spark started for you. Because I know for me, there were parts of school that I enjoyed. There were parts of things at school that I enjoyed. I had a middle school teacher who believed in me and expressed it, but it was really a lot of the things that I did at home that I felt like I got the most creative spark from. I had parents that read to me. I had, books that I really engaged with at home because I wasn't reading comics at school. So just curious about where that came along for you.
I had almost the opposite. That's why I chuckled. I wasn't laughing at you. It's like, um, my dad, as far as I'm convinced, I had the best father in the world. And I will often share this at book events. He was an alcoholic. Um, he smoked too much, but he was honest. He was
Mhm.
present. Uh, and he wasn't that do as I say, not as I do. He would say, look, basically, the easiest way to quit something is not to start. don't
Mm-hmm.
make this mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the struggle within him. And it's like, don't let it grab you. And he recognized he was probably the single most encouraging person in the family that said that this is special. This is
Yeah.
special. Unfortunately, when my family did, when my parents separated, I lost contact with him for nearly a decade.
Mm.
Exacerbated his drinking problem, but he had already lit that thing inside of me that you could trust that inner, thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then from that point on, it's a belief that I really preach is friends are family you choose.
Mm-hmm.
I went out and I found the friends who, you know, were just good people. And they loved you like a brother. They loved you like a parent. And they were often from school. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of teachers, in fact. Oh, this is my note door of notes, but
Oh, I
I have
love it.
I have a couple of my teachers on there that when a teacher pulls you aside and they treat you, I was going to say an equal, but not even that, when they treat you like a human being,
Yeah. Yeah.
when they look you in the eye and say, hey, you know, this is something you need to be aware of, or I want to help you with this. As a kid, you kind of hear that because teachers are, you know,
Yeah.
they're up
Yeah.
the ladder. And so I cling to those voices that said, hey, the grade, I never had a teacher who said that my grades weren't important, but they knew how to shift it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
don't stop doing this thing you're doing. Let's get you to pass English,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that is something. You are onto something. And it's I call them gas station moments. It's just enough to put a little bit of gas in your tank that you can keep going through another
Mm-hmm.
day, um through another year. And those were the things that influenced me the most. So that by the time high school was coming to an end, I was really not talked to at all about college. I My brother's an engineer. I think everyone was like, rightfully so. That's the one you bet on. The engineer. And I just remember I had only one conversation. I told my mom I'm going to go to art school.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't thrilled, but I don't think that there was any expectation of me to do anything else. And so I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a real strength. There's a real strength in knowing your strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's no shame. I was never ashamed, like I said, to share my grades because they were bad. And it was ironically my late spouse was was a teacher. The first time we met, she was smiling at me and I forgot what we were talking about. And she said, "You're an underachiever, aren't you?" And my first reaction was like, ow. And then I thought, yeah, probably. And it's like, yeah. And she's like, no, it's not an insult. She said, if you love something, I bet you're really good at it. I said, oh yeah. And she said, you'll do anything for it. Oh yeah. And if you don't like something, I was like, oh yeah, if I don't like it, it's just to get it by or get it done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, like I said, there's the strength in knowing that.
Yeah.
And so very rare is the person who's the very rare is the student who's good at writing and good at science,
Yeah.
you know.
This is true. This is true.
And the best you can do, and like I said, with those teachers that really worked with me were the ones that found a way to tie the artwork into the
Mm-hmm.
subject at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And it made it bearable for me to then, do the math or do the whatever. So no, I've been very fortunate. And one of the other small gifts is once I graduated from college, there's a period where you often have to do other jobs that aren't your final job.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I never felt myself to be brave, but I realized right away that I'm not doing this. I'm no. Uh, One of my managers, I worked at a copy shop, was a lawyer. and he kept getting promoted, and then he was manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, but you're a lawyer. You spent, 10 years in school or whatever it is, but you got promoted to manager and you just it's like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I gotta paint pretty pictures and, you know, and write these stories.
Yeah.
And it's worked out. It's not easy,
Nice.
but it's easier than doing something you don't love.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's the saying? Find something you love and then find a way to get paid for it, to make a living at it.
Yeah. I think it's even simpler than that. If you find what you love, a lot of the other stuff will start and you stick with it.
Hmm. Hmm.
It'll start to come to you. It's one of the pieces of advice I always give young artists and writers is think of it like a boxing match. Don't go for a knockout in the first round.
Hmm.
You might get it, great, but it's that person who comes back for the second round, the third round, the fourth round, and through time and effort, you start to get noticed,
Yeah.
and your craft starts to get better and better and better and better, and you don't even realize it. You're the because you're not necessarily getting the biggest assignments, but when you look back on it, you can see that, oh, I can see that trajectory.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
getting better. I was starting to get noticed. Now people call me more than I call them.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
And so, yeah, it's someone's, there are thousands of people writing movie scripts, books, and everything else. Someone's got to do those jobs.
Hmm.
And it's usually the person who doesn't give up on it.
True enough. Yeah,
But you've done it. I know you've been writing because I've been watching your podcast.
I do. And thanks for watching.
And you did the other route that's very, I think you found work that they complement each other.
Hmm.
That's if you can find that thing that like as a teacher, you can do anything.
Yeah.
You can be a writer, you can be an artist, but it doesn't take one doesn't take away from the other. The experiences make each of those things better.
Yeah.
That's the other route. I mean, because I never wanted to ever skip a meal in my life.
Hmm.
So for the first decade or so after college, I did whatever jobs I had to do, but those got smaller and smaller as the books got, bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and teaching is, I found it to be its own kind of authoring experience.
Oh yeah,
So I can't imagine myself stepping away from teaching at this point.
the
Um,
experiences alone,
yeah.
and
Oh,
I
yeah.
say, I say this not to kiss up to you. Your students will not believe this. Teachers are the funniest people. Uh, hang out with teachers, not after school, but after you're out of school. Go back to
Hmm.
your teachers and talk to them.
True.
Have an
True.
honest conversation with them. It is mind blowing the stuff that you see and that you keep showing up for every day. It's it's fascinating, and it's important work. I would argue it's the most important work.
That's very unpredictable. Very unpredictable, which I like.
But without teachers, though, you don't have the lawyers, you don't have the doctors, you don't have the artists, you don't have. There's that horrible saying that those who can't do, those who can't teach.
Right. Yeah.
The person who wrote that, it's like you're reading. Who taught you how to read?
Yes. Yeah. Like, really, have you ever tried to teach someone something
Yeah.
you don't know how to do? That's like giving directions to a place you've never been. Like, come on. Come on.
Or you've everyone can find that one teacher that whether they did or didn't like them, oh, Mr. So and so was the worst. Okay, but you've had like 20 teachers in your lifetime and that one was bad.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I was very ironically very fortunate. My second spouse, she was also a teacher. That wasn't a plan. But there is this there's something about teachers. They're willing to show up and love your kids as much as you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's a special thing.
yeah, and it's my late spouse would always say that it was often the toughest kids that would come back to her classroom years later and thank her
Yeah.
because she gave structure. And they didn't know it in the moment. They would fight her, they'd be upset, she would make them do whatever. She would have them read comic books. Not popular. But as far as she was concerned, if they're reading, they're reading.
Yeah.
And that comic book can lead to this, it can lead to that, it can lead to whatever. But getting someone reading engaged is the most important thing. She,
Agreed.
she would say, I'll take a C student with a heart over an A student who doesn't care.
hmm I can see that. Yeah.
And in
That's a
my
good line.
I was not even a C student. Thank God for gym and art. That put me over the top grade wise. Gym
Nice.
and art, easy A's.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a great conversation, and we're coming down to, if you can believe it, like our last minute or so.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, no, you're good. You're good. You are good. I've been in it. So anything that you would want to share to kind of put a bow on it, as far as final words for listeners, spaces that you want to share about, or anything like that.
Um, if anyone's interested, the easiest way is just Instagram. I
hmm
tend to be more I keep up to date with Instagram the most, and that's Aaron Boyd Art, AARON BOYDARTS. Um, but other than that, the number one thing is, like I said, is the boxing thing. Just stick with it.
Love it.
Everyone, the struggle is part of it. It's meant to be part of it, and there's no way around it. And it's just going to make you better.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. You were mentioning the writing, and I think that the turnaround for me was when my wife finally said, "Stop throwing your stuff away. Start putting it out there, and just keep taking those steps forward."
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
keep everything. That was something Jerry Pinkney told me when we first started. If it gets cut off, I'm sorry. But
It's good. We can hop back in for a minute if we need to.
when my career wasn't, when I wasn't sure of myself, that I knew I was doing something good, but I wasn't sure how long it would take to make it. I finally realized I've talked to editors, I've talked to this, I've talked to all these people in the business. I'm going to talk to artists.
hmm
And there were two artists that I contacted, and one was Jerry Pinkney. And he took the time and he talked to me and he walked me through it, told me a few tricks. But the number one thing he said is keep everything. It's part of the journey. You'll need it later.
hmm So Stephen King.
I was fortunate enough to meet Stephen King, but one of the stories that he shared that I thought was the most interesting was, and you'll know this better than I will, because I didn't read this book of his. It's one about a dome of some kind.
Yeah, Under the Dome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've read parts of that, and there was a mini series,
Yeah, I
which I
remember
think went in different directions with Dwight Yoakam. So, yep.
that he wrote that decades ago.
Oh, yeah.
It as he would, I don't think he said these words that it stunk, but there was nothing there. It was missing something. And he put it down, and I think it was, a decade later that he realized where it was going. He understood at that point. And
Yeah.
that's why you don't throw stuff away. You
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have to be a hoarder, but it becomes clear when you can look upon it with fresh eyes and time. So I encourage all people to create whatever medium they find. It's all exercising the same muscle.
Yeah, well, and with digital creating now, I mean, I try to tell people, open up a folder. I had a mentor that told me this. Um, Label it like rough drafts or whatever you want to label it, and just throw things in there. And,
Yeah.
instead of hitting delete. And have you checked out On Writing by Stephen King?
No, no.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's one of the two or three books about writing that I appreciate most. And I've used it in college comp and talked to high school kids about it, and middle school kids, and all those things, because in the back of that, um, we were talking about those imperfections early on in our talk. Love it when a talk comes together like that and it's a cycle. He has pages from one of his books that has editing marks on it. And it's just so nice to see someone whose name is pretty much synonymous with being a published author share some of the process. And because there's still that idea that a story, a page, a career, a life, whatever it happens to be, comes together just, you know, like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not magic.
You don't even often realize that when someone approaches me on the street who knows me for what I do and they think, oh, you've made it. And it's like, oh, I have? Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess, but there's always more mountain to climb.
Hmm.
You don't ever feel like you're at the top because you're just working and working and working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have that folder. I think that's beautiful. Even if you don't have to even look at it.
Yeah.
And you may never go back to it. But I bet you most people will go back to that folder
Hmm.
because you'll have an inch of an idea like, oh yeah, I get that now.
Hmm.
And with the book that I just the one that I'm working on now, that's kind of how that came together. For years, I'd had the story bouncing around and I was trying to force it to be a certain thing. And in 2 days, I had something that happened in my life and it gave me a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I could start talking to the characters. And I thought, oh no, it's not this way, it's this way.
Hmm.
And once the characters start talking, they tell you where they're going to go.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was actually working on something else at the time. I had promised to share with my agent, and I stopped doing that because this was just so clearly like, no, there's something happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Love it. I'm
Well,
glad we came back for the Stephen King
thank you.
aspect, and yeah,
Cool guy,
glad
by
to.
the way. Very cool guy.
Oh, I bet, I bet. I've never met him. I did email his website to be like, hey, would you come on my podcast and talk to me? But I haven't heard back. Can you imagine?
He, he, he's busy.
He's a
He's
busy guy.
When I met him, anyone who can come into a room and just like, hi, I'm Steve. And he wasn't being humble. He was just being like, I'm Steve. And
Yeah,
he played video games for like 20 minutes. I was like, okay, this guy's cool.
yeah, yeah. To not let the all the things get to you. Yeah, yeah, love
Blue
that.
jeans and flannel kind of work well for him too. So it's like, yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, yeah, seems to be. And prolific beyond belief. So
Yeah, he's gonna be okay. Don't worry about Steve. He's gonna he's
There-
gonna be okay.
there's a great story about him too, and I'll end with this. I won't keep you. Um, there's a story about him in Chuck Palahniuk's book about writing, the name of which is not in my head at the moment, but I'll have to look it up. And it's basically this story of how dedicated he is to fandom because um someone wants like he like cuts his finger or something on a signature when he's signing a book. And so someone wants his blood on the page, and then everybody wants his blood on the page. And it turns out to be a really interesting story. Of course, with Chuck Palahniuk telling it, it's always going to be interesting and uh, as he does. But yeah, definitely so. Definitely an interesting guy and a kind person. And you've been very kind to spend more than a single Zoom limit time with me. I appreciate that very much.
I'm a talker, so I'm impressed I didn't go longer. So, but thank
It Yeah, it is all good. Glad to talk with you. Glad to share this out, and I'll be sure and tag you and do all of those things when I put it out into the world. And looking forward to the creative work that you have to come.
thank you. Very proud to be here with you guys or
Thank you.
with you. Thank you.
Thanks.